Hello, everyone, and welcome to Disney Co. in the Know Harry Potter Edition. This is episode 4, and I am your host, Bruce Beal, owner of 407 and Beyond Vacation Company and Disney Co. in the Know podcast. And today I am joined by Disney Co. in the Know contributors Hannah.
Hey, y'all.
And Jacob.
Hello.
And Elizabeth.
Hello.
And Steven.
Hey, everyone.
And before we get started, I will say that Disney Co. in the Know podcast is sponsored by 407 and Beyond Vacation Company, Disney and Universal experts that help plan and book your perfect family vacation. So all you have to do is show up, have fun, and create family memories. Visit us at www.407vacations.com. And check out our other weekly podcast, Disney Co. in the Know, where we discuss the week's Disney and Universal news and have fun discussions about topics such as our top attractions, our favorite restaurants, and more. To watch, check us out on YouTube at Disney Co. in the Know and follow us on Facebook at 407 and Beyond Vacation Company and join in on the discussion on our Facebook group, Disney Co. in the Know. All right, guys. So today we're discussing Chapter 4, and Jake's going to guide us. So, Jake, why don't you go ahead and take us away?
Yep. So this chapter ends right where the previous one left off, literally with a bang. We hear Hagrid knocking on the door, and he knocks so hard that he knocks the door off its hinges and comes on into to the hut on the rock where Harry and the Dursleys are staying. And he comes on in, and no one knows who he is, so they're all scared of him. He's this massive guy. Of course, we all know him from Chapter 1, but Harry and the Dursleys have never seen him before, at least to Harry's recollection. And so he comes on in, and we finally find out what Uncle Vernon had in the long, thin package that he purchased at some point when they were running around. So he pulls out a rifle to protect himself. That's his defense strategy against wizards, apparently. And so Hagrid comes on in, and they ask him who he is. Or, well, not yet, I guess. First, Vernon threatens him, I think, and we see Hagrid take the rifle, and he ties it into a knot and throws it into the corner with that incredible strength of his. So clearly that wasn't the best idea to use the rifle to threaten him.
I feel like they make the movie version of Hagrid out to be a lot dumber than the book version, at least to start, because he walks in and he's like, make me some tea. How you doing, Harry? And then in the movies, he walks in, he's like, Harry, you're so fat. And he's like talking to Dudley. And it's like,
yeah.
I mean, he says right in here, you look just like your dad. You've got your mom's eyes. Like, I don't. Like,
yeah.
That
I feel like they do that with a few characters.
Yeah.
From the books, like Ginny, Ron, Hagrid. But, you know, I think they have to appease the audience, and they have to, like Stephen has said previously, like you have to accommodate what will translate well onto the screen. So.
Yeah. And like, I guess they were trying to make it like a funnier version of the scene in the movies, maybe with him mixing the two of them up. But like,
yeah, I'm not sure that's entirely necessary. I think the scene's
pretty good just as it is.
enough in the book.
Yeah. And I thought this scene or this chapter was good too, because the first chapter, we don't get like a true description of Hagrid. Like we do, but not really. This is like really starts off with a very in-depth description of like what Hagrid is like. We can see how strong he is. So again, that character development, we're just getting a very good visual as to who this person is. Knocking on the door.
Yeah. So we also see here a little more of this dumbing down in the movies thing. We get the part where Hagrid presents Harry with his birthday cake that he so thoughtfully brought. Of course, in the book, it's spelled correctly because it's just Happy Birthday, Harry. That's not too hard of spelling, but in the movie, we see Hagrid apparently couldn't even spell that. So I guess Hogwarts must not teach spelling very well up through your that must be an advanced
on it.
So Harry gets his cake, and he goes to say thank you, but instead he asks who Hagrid is because, of course, he doesn't know yet. And that is when Hagrid introduces himself. He says, I'm Rubius Hagrid. I'm Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts. And so, of course, that doesn't help Harry that much. Because he doesn't even know what Hogwarts is. So when he tries to inquire further as to who exactly Hagrid is, Hagrid says, "Well, of course, you'll know Hogwarts." And Harry says, "Well, no, actually, I don't." And when Hagrid, of course, gets a little upset at this, as he should be, Harry tries to apologize, but Hagrid knows that it's the Dursleys' fault. They're the ones who have kept this from him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of turns on them a little bit here.
Yeah. I wonder if that was like on purpose, that Hagrid wasn't supposed to know. You know what I mean? Like how Hannah made the point in chapter 3 about Dumbledore kind of making it seem like that. Well, if Hagrid and Dumbledore were such right hand, like if he depended on him so much, why did he leave out the fact that Harry might not know about Hogwarts? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think Hagrid even says in here, he says, well, I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I didn't know that you didn't know anything.
Right.
So I'm not sure whether that was intentional on Dumbledore's part, or if maybe he didn't even know everything, which seems hard to believe that Dumbledore wouldn't know every little thing. But
especially with Miss Fig there.
Yeah, my guess is he figures that Harry doesn't know anything, but he can't confirm it. And we know, like, from later books and things, that, like, Dumbledore is one who kind of plays his cards close to his chest, and he doesn't share all of the information. He shares only what he feels like is really necessary in that moment. So if he says to Hagrid, you need to go get him, you need to give him this letter, he's not getting it, he may not feel like it's necessary that he states that Harry probably doesn't know what's happening. Or he maybe just thought it would be funnier too. With, Vernon already going crazy, have this giant guy show up and give him a piece of his mind. So.
That's true.
Yep. So
quick question to backtrack slightly. Before Hagrid and Vernon kind of start getting into things, we see Hagrid like bend down at the fireplace where they were unable to start a fire the night before, and when he leans back, there's a fire there. We know from later books and later explanations in this book that Hagrid's wand was broken into pieces and put into his umbrella. His umbrella is not mentioned in this scene. So do you guys think that he's not only doing magic without a wand, but that he's also doing magic non-verbally in this scene? Because we know that that's an extremely difficult thing to do magic without any spells. Like, they state it in later books. So is that what he's doing here? Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I would guess that it's just not mentioned that he pulled out the umbrella and said the spell. I think they kind of make a point of Harry and the Dursleys don't know exactly what he's doing, but it's implied that he is doing something.
Yeah, I think it's something like, he bent over and obscured the view of the fireplace, so
he probably whipped out his.
Yeah, they probably just pointed the umbrella, but probably nonchalantly. As nonchalantly as you could pull out a pink umbrella and do a spell.
Right, but also, I guess he is so large that he could probably pull it out behind his little magic filled
and then not see it.
No one would know.
Yeah, speaking of like him being so large, like his coat is filled with things. Like more than his coat has to be so big that because he just fills so many things with it. And I think at one time, at one point, he tells Harry that careful because something might be wiggling in there. So he's got live things in his pockets. So
I'm gonna be honest, I'm jealous of that coat. Let's be real here, our pockets on girls' clothes are lame, so can I get me one of these? That's all I have to say.
It's a huge jacket with pockets in it,
Or how they kind of bring up Hagrid's size each time he sinks down into the sofa.
Yeah.
Or bends a little bit more until it touches the ground. Just a fun description.
Yeah, it's a pretty tough sofa to take that big. I think it's mentioned in chapter 1. I think they describe Hagrid as twice as tall as a normal man and 5 times as wide. So who knows if that's literal? And, that is a big dude. I think it's also mentioned at the start of this chapter when he comes into the hut, he actually has to bend down because his head would touch the ceiling otherwise. So Yeah, big guy.
Very big.
Very.
So yeah, so at this point he does say to Harry, like, you mean to tell me you don't know anything? To which Harry, of course, being our little smart aleck, goes, well, I can do math and stuff like that. That's his response there, and then Hagrid says, well, no, you don't know anything about like any of our world. And Harry says, well, what do you mean our world? Like, obviously, as being raised by muggles, he would have no idea what that means. And so Hagrid proceeds to tell him, his parents are famous, which again I think would come as about as big of a shock as being a wizard. Like, as an 11-year-old boy, if you find out that you and your family are famous, that'd be just about as cool as being a wizard, being a famous wizard, though.
Right?
Yeah. And especially after being told like by the Dursleys for so long that they were dead, to know someone in that moment that knew your parents, and you're like, wait, what's happening right here?
And someone who like knew them fondly.
Yes, because of course Petunia obviously knew her sister, but
right,
like
but
knew him
just,
fondly
like,
in the wizarding world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of the first time, it is the first time other than chapter 1 where we're seeing that connection of like the magical world to Harry, and it's like really like, oh my gosh, this is exciting, like to be able to see that connection being formed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as Hagrid attempts to reveal more information to Harry, we see Uncle Vernon protest some more, as he does throughout this chapter. He's finally found his voice, which he seems to have lost earlier, but he tries to forbid him to tell Harry anything, and Hagrid just brushes that off. As insignificant as Uncle Vernon is to someone like Hagrid, he continues and he tells Harry, he gives him that famous line, which is a little different in the book than it is in the movie, but he says, you're a wizard. And so Harry doesn't believe it at first. He's kind of, he has the reaction you'd expect of everyone, like, yeah, I'm not a wizard. I'm just me. But Hagrid persists, and he gives him the letter and says, I think it's time you had this and you read it. And so Harry finally gets that elusive letter, after all the magic and stuff we talked about before. Hagrid hand delivers it to him, and so he gets to read it. It details his invitation to attend school at Hogwarts. Tells him some stuff like, we await your response by owl no later than, I think it says July 31st, which would be the current date.
Yeah.
So, of course, that's the thing that jumps out to Harry the most about the letter, is not, oh, there's a school for wizards. It's, what the heck does you await my owl mean? So when he asks Hagrid about that, Hagrid does pull out an owl, I think, from one of the pockets in his coat. We got even more living things in there. We got dormants and all that. So he pulls one out, scribbles down a letter real quick, and sends it off. I think it's a letter to Dumbledore, right? Saying, Harry giving him his letter, all that. And I think this is our first introduction to owls as a source of messaging. I think it's implied.
Officially, yes.
There's owls flying around and stuff, but
officially.
So we get to see that. We're introduced to it along with Harry. He
I
finally
love
figure out what that means.
the visual image here. He rolls up the note, he shoves it in the owl's mouth, he opens up the door and just chucks the owl into the storm and closes the door. Like, it's just
I think Harry even says, it's in his thoughts, like, just as simple as you would like making a telephone call or something like that.
Like, it's just like,
again, something that is seemingly so absurd to us in the real world that is just commonplace in the wizard world.
Yeah, I think we're also introduced to the word muggle, right? Is this the first time we're introduced to muggle?
Yes, that's
correct. And then us fans are reintroduced to the term no mages, in a series later on. So we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, for us Americans. But I think one of the times Uncle Vernon tries to stop him, he goes, "Oh, a great muggle like you," or something.
Yeah.
I also think that this scene, like, starts, or this chapter also kind of, earlier we were talking about Uncle Vernon trying to protect like his family from maybe outside forces. But I also think that he makes a point to Harry about like, well, Harry says, you knew I was a wizard, you know? And I think that's important because I think at the end of the day, like Vernon was trying to protect himself. And I know someone said that in the previous chapter, but I think that's what it boils down to, is him trying to protect himself. I don't think he was actually scared of the wizards. I just don't think he wanted it in his house. I don't know. That's kind of the vibe that I got from this chapter. I know some people might disagree with that.
Yeah. Because he talks about wanting to stamp out the magic, but big picture, if you think about it, we have a representative from the school coming into the household, preparing to take an 11-year-old child away from the guardian and the family.
Yeah.
So in a weird kind of sense, that's weird who has the authority there, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, when you look at it that way, it's like, oh, okay.
When you look at the way Harry's treated by the Dursleys, it's kind of shocking that someone hasn't come along to take him away earlier, even someone from the Muggle world, you know?
Yeah, we'd kind of talked about that in the first episode quite a bit, how we felt like, how did this not, like, how has no one taken him away yet?
Yeah, Child Protective Services or anything like
that. Yeah, for real.
I think
they
the next
take them in, and they feed them and they clothe them. I mean, that's.
They also lock them up the stairs, and
they have to put him in a cupboard.
Yeah, and they boil his clothes. Yeah.
He was dyeing them gray.
I don't know if there's a defense there for the Dursleys.
I think this is also a really good point too, though. Like, this is the first time that someone's on Harry's side, because you can see Hagrid getting so upset. Like, he's a wizard. You didn't tell him. You told him his parents died in a car crash. Like, no, they were actually killed by the most famous wizard. Like, doesn't go into that detail yet. But, you know, and then like saying like all these things, and it's kind of on Harry's side. And Harry's never really, from what we see, has had that. And so I think in Harry's mind, he's like, I don't care who this person is, he's standing up for me, I'm going to go with him, you know, like no matter what. Like, that's, I think, how he kind of is convinced to go to Hogwarts and attend it for that reason.
I think it's really interesting. We had kind of talked in our previous podcast about Vernon's the one that the chapter 3 focuses on, and his reaction to the letters, and how it's shocking that like Petunia says nothing when we know from later like moments how she feels about the situation. And here is when we finally do get her reaction to everything. She finally hits her breaking point and explodes with her disgust about the wizarding world.
Yeah, we see here this is the point where Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia reveal that, you know, they knew, and Harry's shocked. He goes, oh, you know, you knew that I'm a wizard? Because that would, of course, would also have to be a big surprise. He didn't know, but to imagine that you're totally, I don't want to say totally muggle because he wouldn't have known that word, but like totally ordinary aunt and uncle would like know about the wizard world and stuff. Like it said, that's the most un-Dursley-ish thing there is, but we're aware of it. And we see this little rant from Petunia where she says, you know, oh, my darn sister, you know, being what she was, like coming back and stuff. One of the things I find really interesting in this little passage here, knowing what we know about the wizard world and the laws and rules in it, she mentions their sister would come back home and do stuff like turn teacups into mice or something, like over the holidays, which we know kids aren't allowed to do magic at home over the holidays. So what do you guys think of that? What that's
I mean, they're not supposed to do magic at home over the holidays, but we know that, you know, Harry does. We see it in later books, and I'm sure that there's no way that the Weasley children aren't doing magic at home in the summer.
I wonder if it just means in the presence of muggles.
Yes, that is the way it works, I believe, is the charm can determine when magic is done. Like we see this with Dobby, right? Determine that magic has been performed, they just can't determine who performed it. So for someone like the Weasleys being in a wizard family, obviously they could, and no one would know because there's all kinds of magic being performed. But for Muggles,
True.
We see this with Dobby in the second book. He performs the hover charm on the pudding, and Harry gets in trouble for it. So I think the Muggle world is where this would really apply. And I think Harry gets in trouble for it again in the fifth book for performing the Patronus in the sight of a Muggle and stuff. So I thought it was interesting that Lily would go back and apparently perform magic. Maybe laws were different back then. That was
maybe
I had,
that's very possible. It's also possible,
or maybe
that,
like simple magic, or if she was like doing homework from Transfigurations or something.
Homework. I was going to say also, we know that Lily is good friends with Severus when they're young, and that maybe Petunia oversaw the two of them doing magic together, and like, so they weren't maybe necessarily in the presence of a Muggle, like for the charm to like really capture that, but maybe she was somehow spying on them from like far enough away that she wasn't counted as being a presence, even though she saw what was happening.
This might go down like a really long road, so I'm just going to bring up the point though, but I love like Pottermore, how J.K. Rowling like takes you down all these avenues, and you just like all these names that she's created and the genealogy and like everything. I would love to know like Lily and Petunia's parents. Do they ever talk about like who's a Muggle? Were they mudbloods? Were they both Muggle? Like were they wizards? Like what was happening? I don't know.
I believe that they're both Muggles because, I mean, if you think to like books, 5 and 6, when Harry's getting to see some of Snape's memories of him calling her a mudblood, that's something you would only call a Muggle-born person.
Right.
Yeah, that's established. She's...
it is. Okay.
But to follow that point about their parents real quick, their parents were so proud of having a witch in the family. Do we know what happened to Harry's grandparents on either side?
I always wonder that.
Like, why did he go?
Couldn't they send him there?
Exactly. Why did he go to Petunia? Like, do we ever find out? Did something happen to the Potters? Did something happen to the Evans grandparents? Like, why didn't he go to them?
I know, because there is a point referenced when he's standing in front of the mirror of Erised. Is that what it's called? Yeah, when he's standing there and he like makes a comment, or I think it's in front of there, and he's like, my whole family's dead. He like makes that comment. So I was like, maybe they just passed away. I don't know.
Yeah, but you would think like, did they pass away before Harry was even born? Because how did they allow Petunia and Vernon to treat Harry that way, even as a young child? Like you would think that they would step in and do something. So they must. Yeah. And we probably don't have the answers to that, but.
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. I never really thought about his grandparents, if they're around, they'd be able to take him instead of the Dursleys.
Or be able to say like,
no, I think we can infer that his grandparents aren't around, because I feel like in chapter 1, when they're dropping him off, Dumbledore says this is the only family he has.
Yeah.
So I think we can infer that he, like, even that extends to relatives.
Yep, you're right. It does say up mine, page 13, I've come to bring him to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has left now. So,
but Sirius, he was a godfather. He could have gone there.
Well,
we
know why that is.
Well,
but that hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, at that moment, remember, Hagrid had just borrowed the bike.
Yeah,
but
so none of that had happened.
But we also know that Dumbledore had ulterior motives for sending him to live with his mother.
And he didn't want him to live in that's the point that I always come back to too, but I'm always like, he could have gone to Sirius at that point.
He wouldn't have the protection.
I thought that's kind of when Sirius approached whoever he attacked in the street. Peter Pettigrew. Yeah, I thought it was kind of when, like, immediately he follows and finds Peter.
He does. Like,
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Presumably right after he lends his bike to Hagrid. I think it's in the days immediately following. Of Lily and James.
And I'm sure that in his mind he thought, like, Harry will go to them until I find Peter, and then I'm gonna go get him.
Sure.
Like in Sirius's mind. that, because I feel like Sirius and Lily were friends. Like the Marauders knew
Mhm.
Lily in school. She was dating James. They knew each other. They loved
Mhm.
him enough to make him Harry's godfather. So he would know the kind of people that her family was. And I would think
Right.
the only reason he would be okay with not having Harry come right to him, especially if he knew her parents were dead, James' parents were dead, was if he thought to himself, I'm going to go get him right away.
Mhm.
Yeah, as I say,
Good
unless
point.
Dumbledore told him about the magic and stuff and the reasons for putting him there, but I don't feel like that happens. I'm not really sure though.
All interesting points. All right.
Yeah,
Take
no,
us.
that was really good. I never thought about it from my parents before. So that was very interesting. But yeah, so this is the part where Petunia makes her comment about, oh, they went and got themselves blown up, which is apparently what she thought happened.
Mhm.
And Harry goes, oh, you told me they died in a car crash. And Hagrid is still very angry. Oh, car crash could never kill James and Lily Potter. And so this is where he tells Harry, exactly what happened to his parents. He tells him about Voldemort, gives him a brief summary of his rise to power, what he was doing, how Dumbledore was the only one who could oppose him. Hogwarts was the only safe place, but wizards were getting picked off left and right, stuff like that. We get a lot of cool moments here that kind of hint towards later in the series. I feel like he mentions some things like some of the significant wizards he killed, like the Pruitts and the
McKinnon's.
I think McKinnon's,
The bones.
which of course are names that are going to come up later. So I always appreciate seeing little things like that. And then of course when he describes Voldemort going to kill Harry's parents, we see the little details like it was on Halloween, stuff like that, things that are going to come up later, and we get to hear Harry's slight recollection of it as he's told the story where he remembers that flash of green light. Again, it's going to come up later, killing curse and all that. I think he hears a high-pitched laugh, something like that. Again, going to be a calling card of Voldemort's kind of. One other thing relating to the green light, a little hint towards how the killing curse is going to work. We also hear Hagrid say once Voldemort disappeared, once his power appeared to be broken, he says people came out of trances and stuff like that. So again, we get another hint towards the Imperious curse, which I've mentioned this before in the podcast. I always love to see these little things, little details that are clearly decided ahead of time that J.K. Rowling put into the book here, but won't even be mentioned again until like the fourth book. Like we got three books to go before we're ever going to find out about the unforgivable curses and stuff. So I always think it's really cool to see that kind of stuff.
When do you guys remember when exactly we find out about the prophecy for the first time? And like who all knows about it? Like obviously Voldemort knows, Trelawney knows because she's the one who said it, and she said it to Dumbledore, or he was there, like he knows, but are they the only three? Because I mean Hagrid straight up says like nobody knows why he went after him and why he tried to kill you then too. Like no, maybe he just liked killing, no one knows. But I feel like to kind of go along with that, hinting at later things, him saying like no one knows why, like, but she kind of hints that like there's a reason.
Right. I think that's a really good point.
Severus or Albus that actually overheard it originally, wasn't it?
Yes, they were the two that heard it because I believe she gave it while she was interviewing for the divination professor position at Hogwarts.
And isn't that part of why they give her the position?
Yeah, I think
so, yeah.
They proved that she can actually prophesy. And so I think Dumbledore was the one conducting the interview, and Snape just overheard it through the door, and he runs and tells Voldemort. And so, yeah, that's a good point. I want to say the first time we get a hint that there's some kind of prophecy, that's what I was going to say is 3, when she makes the prophecy about what's going to go down with Sirius and Lupin and the Shrieking Shack and all that. I think Dumbledore says, this brings her total count of prophecies up to 2 now, or something like that.
But like we don't find out about the actual content until later, correct?
Up to 5. No, 5.
Not until 5. Yeah.
So I think that's where it's really introduced.
Which is, I think, so funny. Like, I feel like I've known Harry Potter through the books and the movies for so long that I don't necessarily recall my first time going through it so much anymore. Like, I don't necessarily recall a time when I didn't know about the prophecy. So like, after 5 books to then have that like bombshell kind of dropped, I think would be a really interesting thing to like go back and re-experience, and like how would it change the way that you viewed everything.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you have a really good point bringing that up. I think that's probably another thing that we can assume was planned out this far ahead, you know, with all the other little details that we see pop up in later books. I'm sure she knew exactly where she was going with that from the beginning. So, so anyway, at this point, let's see. Going over. Oh yeah, so Harry is still struggling with the fact that he's a wizard. You know, he kind of goes, well, like if I'm a wizard, why has my life sucked so much? And that's when you know, Hagrid says to him, like, well, you know, haven't you ever, in moments of like anger or something, done these inexplicable magic acts? And of course, we've been introduced to these moments a couple chapters ago. You know, Harry jumps onto the school building, he regrows his hair in a night, he makes the glass disappear, all that kind of stuff. So this is the point where Harry really comes to terms with the fact that, okay, I'm a wizard, I'm going to wizard school, I'm famous, there's an evil wizard out there, that kind of stuff. I might have skipped over the part real quick. I think, you know, Hagrid does go over when Voldemort tried to kill Harry, he disappeared. No one really knows what happened to him. A lot of people say he died. As Hagrid says, you know, cod swallow. He's still out there and stuff. So that's a little ominous going forward. But this is where we really get our first
hint at the villain.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the major overarching plot of the series. You know, it's like that's where we're going with all this, is a final showdown with Voldemort, even if it is 7 books later.
I do want to add before we wrap up the chapter a little bit that we do get a little bit of an Easter egg or a hint that of Hagrid's time at Hogwarts. And Jake, I know I'm going a little bit ahead, so I apologize, but we do see that you know, Harry asked him, why aren't you supposed to do magic? And he's like, well, you know, I can, I was expelled. So that kind of leaves a little bit of a cliffhanger, you know, wondering why he was expelled, which of course we find out in book 3. What happened.
Yeah, I think.
Book 2, sorry. Yeah, Chamber of Secrets. So
I think what this book also shows a little bit too is the idea that once you read the whole book series and then you reread it, you realize how much this book was so important to the entire series, because it sets up so much in the next chapters and in the next the entire Harry Potter series. So it's a really important book. And I know we said it, but it's incredible how J.K. Rowling was able to have the foresight, like with the pink umbrella and, you know, putting the wand in there, like all of that. It's incredible to be able to have those little Easter eggs now, and then as we're reading through it now, to be able to see like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen in book 5 or 7, you know.
So I'm going to hold what I'm going to say to my favorite character of the week. So,
I think that you are going to say what I was going to say. So
okay, good. So Jake, anything else?
I mean, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the chapter there. We get that little background information on Hagrid, and then Harry, you know, finally after midnight goes to sleep, and Hagrid gives him that coat with all the dormice and little things crawling around in it, and I think that about wraps things up.
Yeah, and and Harry still has to wait all the way through September to go to Hogwarts. He gets this exciting news, and it's like, okay, now go back to the Dursleys for another month, but we'll talk about that in the next
But it gives him some protection, so.
and it's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
So,
There was one thing that we missed when we were covering plot points.
okay.
And that is that Hagrid in trying to prove a point to Vernon Dursley, and Vernon Dursley is insulting Dumbledore, and Hagrid says, "You will not insult that man in front of me." And then he tries to turn Dudley into a pig, and it doesn't work, and all he gets is a tail. And Dumbledore says, or not Dumbledore, sorry, excuse me, Hagrid says, like, I meant to turn him into a pig, but I guess he was enough of a pig already. And, was his failed magic due to that, or due to the fact that his wand is broken and inside of an umbrella? We never really know that for sure. But I love that scene, and getting to see Hagrid do a bit of magic, and then he says, I'm not supposed to, so don't tell anyone. And it's more kind of hints of what's to come for Hagrid. So.
Yeah,
that is true.
I love that scene.
Of course, that brings us to a really good point that you brought up earlier. I believe in this scene he does nonverbal magic. Does he not?
Yes, right there. He swishes the umbrella.
Yeah, I think we know for sure that he doesn't
That's true.
use any kind of incantation or anything. If he does, it's omitted, but it certainly makes it seem like he performs nonverbal magic. So maybe that's part of the reason why it didn't work all the way, if it's more difficult.
That's true.
Or I mean, we do know there are certainly reasons why Hagrid would struggle with such a simple spell, So, I'm just saying, his wand snapped in half. He didn't complete his education.
I know. I was going to say that. Think of, like, maybe Hagrid is better. I mean, he has a broken wand and is using magic non-verbally and is still able to do some spells. Like, think of how powerful he could have been had he gotten a full education and had a working wand. And
I mean, we see firsthand the destruction that a broken wand can bring.
Book 2
too. So we know that's a bit of a struggle there. Even Spellotape won't fix it all the way. So.
All right.
That's fine. All right. So Jake, this was your chapter. So let's start with you. Who was your favorite character of the chapter?
I'm gonna have to go with Hagrid. I think it's nice to see the perspective of a wizard or someone from the wizarding world on what Harry's had to go through. We get to see him flip out on the Dursleys and all that cool stuff. So kind of put them in their place and all that. It's nice to see them really terrified of someone instead of exerting their control over Harry. Now they're kind of the ones that are that are on the receiving end of that. So I think it's definitely Hagrid for this one.
I think that's a strong pick. Elizabeth, what about you?
So I'm going to go with Harry. I liked seeing him like acting surprised, but then at the same time be like, you know what, I'm going to do this because the Dursleys have been terrible to me and I'm going. And it's probably a way to defy his uncle as well, because his uncle does not want him going. So a little rebellion in him.
All right. Steven, favorite character of the chapter?
I'd probably have to go with Hagrid. This was actually the last book in the series that I read. So I'm most familiar with this story through the movie. So when I think of this playing out, I think of all the memorable lines and quotes that Hagrid delivered, like, you're a wizard, Harry, you're famous, the car crash thing. I mean, did you ever wonder where you learned it all? And those quotes are kind of sentimental to me. So I think of the movie a lot when I think of this scene.
Man, that's good.
This was the last one you read?
Yes, I started with book 2.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. So, all right. So wait. You started with book 2. So you've read it through, but you started with book 2.
Say it again?
Which?
I started the series reading book 2, so book 1 was the last one that I read.
Okay, yeah. Because someone could take that as you read 1 and then stopped. So I just wanted to clarify that you read them, but you just started out at the second one.
Yeah, I started the series on the Chamber of Secrets.
Okay, all right.
I don't mean to keep harping on this. I just think it's really interesting. Did you wait until after the 7th book was out to go back and read the first one? Or did you just read like the ones that were out at the time, like 2, 3, 4 or something, and then go back and do one?
Well, if it was the last.
It would have been, I didn't get into the series until we saw the first movie in theaters.
Hmm.
So I don't remember what year that was, but
I want to say
I want to say
2004
2001.
might have been out.
I think it was 2001.
Okay. Yeah, I had probably read quite a few of the later ones. I was probably 5 or 6 before I ever read the first one.
very interesting.
Gotcha.
That's a
Yeah.
good perspective. I think that's kind of cool to.
So I think of the movie a lot when I think of this particular story, because that's what I remember, and that's kind of what's sentimental.
Mm-hmm.
That makes total sense. So, Hannah, your favorite character of the chapter?
My favorite character is definitely Hagrid. I would like to ask a quick question for you guys. What house is Hagrid in? Does anyone recall?
I think
He's
he
in
was
the
in
hut on the sea.
Gryffindor.
Stephen went the literal route.
He was in a hut. Was he Gryffindor? Because I may be misremembering, or they may have messed it up in the movies, but I feel like when I think of the scene from the Chamber of Secrets of the flashback with the spider, I thought he was in a Hufflepuff robe. But I could be wrong. I could be misremembering that.
I don't know.
I don't remember seeing a specific set of robes on him. In fact, when I think back to that scene from the movie, I feel like he might almost be wearing something similar to
What he wears
what
anyways.
he wears normally. But
He was always keeper keys.
for some reason, I kind of wanted to say he was a Hufflepuff too, although I really don't know.
And maybe
Yeah.
this is just coming from a Hufflepuff, but like the reason he is my favorite character in this chapter is I love his heart and how much he cares. I mean, you see him never insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me, and you see him caring so much for Harry, even though he's only met Harry once, and like you see how much he cared for Harry's parents and for all of the students who go through the doors of Hogwarts. His hut is always open for tea and everything, you know. And I just love seeing how much he cares for everyone and how like he's just willing to go so far to like protect the people that he cares about, and it's really apparent in this scene. So he's my favorite character because of that.
Well, I will piggyback from that because he's my favorite as well, and that makes Hagrid my favorite character of the chapter. 3 out of the last 4 chapters. And so I will keep the streak alive. Hagrid for all the reasons everybody said before. So
even when he's not in the chapter, you got to find a way.
Even when he wasn't in the chapter, and maybe that'll be my task for the Sorcerer's Stone. How can Hagrid? What justification can I come up with for Hagrid to be my favorite character of each chapter? So, all right, very good. So, Jake, your chapter, your key takeaway.
See, I'm gonna go with how it kind of sets up, the whole overarching story with like Harry and Voldemort. We see the origin story between the two of them, the very basics of how their relationship started, and we know at this point that this is where the story is going in the long run. Even though we get Voldemort versus Harry a little bit at the end of the book, but this is the moment where readers know that this is what the series is going to be about. Like, this is why we're reading this. So I think that's what I'm going to go with as the main takeaway.
Very good. Elizabeth.
I agree with Jake.
Very good. Stephen.
My takeaway, I think, just from a reader's perspective, getting drawn further into the book is kind of for as much as Hagrid gives us, he doesn't give us. And so there's just like, we know these things have happened, but there's just endless possibilities and mystery and curiosity that kind of really wants us to go further into the next chapter. So this is where we find out things are special. This is where we find out about he who must not be named. And it's just kind of like, what is all this about? So that kind of kept me curious, moving into the next chapter.
That's good. Hannah, what about you?
Magic is real and Harry's a wizard. Up until this point, I do not think that the words wizard or magic were ever explicitly mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they hint at it with what happens between Dumbledore with his Deluminator and McGonagall, and they mentioned muggles before, but they don't really explain what they are. And we know that Harry's like done some weird stuff and that his parents are like part of some other world, but they never straight up say it until this point, until we hear Hagrid say, "Harry, you're a wizard." Mm-hmm. And so I mean, like, the series wouldn't be what it is without that line and that point. So that's my takeaway. Like, magic is real and Harry's a wizard.
Yeah, I agree. My key takeaway is that quote, Harry, you're a wizard. If it was Harry, you're not a muggle, it wouldn't carry the same. Like there's something just, that's really cool, powerful about that. And the key takeaway is Hagrid's there at the beginning. He's there at the middle. He's there for Harry at the end. Hagrid is the all around guy. So I appreciate his character. So I'm looking forward to chapter 4. Or excuse me, that was chapter 4. No, we're gonna do this one all over again. I'm looking forward to chapter.
Yet.
Yeah.
Need more Hagrid.
I'm looking forward to chapter 5, getting over to Diagon Alley. So if you are listening or watching this, please subscribe to our channel. Let us know in the comments below what your favorite parts of the chapter were, who your favorite character is of this chapter, and any other thoughts you have about the Harry Potter edition of our show. Follow us on Facebook at 407 and Beyond Vacation Co. and join the Facebook group and join in on the discussion, Disney Co. in the Know. So guys, until next time, until chapter 5, take care, and I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye, guys.